today. My name is Diana Copeland. And if you could please go ahead and take a seat. And we'll go ahead and get started here. It's wonderful to see all of your faces tonight. And to get started, so again, my name is Diana, and I'm one of the teaching faculty with a semester in Detroit. All right, and so I'd actually like to introduce Craig Register, who will be speaking with us a little bit about what this community classroom is all about.
All right, thank you. How's everybody doing? Good afternoon. Welcome to the Cass Corridor Commons. In a few minutes, you're going to hear more about, from Will and other things, the space that we're in. And I'm just going to take a couple minutes to talk a little bit about Detroiters Speak, which of course is our classroom, our community classroom that you've all walked into tonight. And some of you, raise your hand if you've been to a Detroiters Speak class in the past. Raise it really high. Raise it really high so we can see it. Okay, so that's great. That's great. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for coming back. We love having folks come back. And we call this our community classroom. And I also want to point out, and she's going to love this, but somebody named Lolita Hernandez is all the way in the back. Lolita could wave at us. Say hello to Lolita. Yes, that's a proper squeal or whatever that was you guys were doing. That's not the right word. It was a yelp. It was a yelp. Lolita was one of the very important brainchilds for Detroiters Speak. And for many years, Lolita was a main faculty person who organized this. And we want to thank her for that and just acknowledge that. She's a colleague of ours in semester in Detroit. She's a writer. She's an activist. She's a wonderful thinker and creative person. And we love Lolita. And I just want to give some props to her every time I can. So thank you, Lolita, for helping us in this way and get this class off the ground a couple of years ago. Yay! And so I'm pretty sure this is the only classroom at U of M that feeds you. So consider it your rebate. That's the joke I use with students all the time. It's part of your tuition rebate. The classroom, though, just to speak a little bit about that, when we say community classroom, we mean a couple things. And it should probably be obvious to you, although I think we can all agree that word community is probably used often and maybe somewhat casually, and it sort of suggests that we all understand what it means or that we all have the same idea of what it means. And I just want to say a few things about what I think it means for this gathering and for the first of 8 gatherings. So I hope you know that by walking in tonight, you walked into at least a partial expectation, certainly an invitation, to come back, and to come back several times. And we'll talk more about the trajectory of the course in a few minutes. But when we say community classroom, Detroiters Speak, we mean a couple things. First of all, we invite the community, and of course, which community? Well, this is a public event, so anybody can come. We're not going to turn anybody away, and that's one really important thing to say. We call it Detroiters Speak because we're in Detroit and we want to hear Detroiters speak. And so that doesn't mean if you're not from Detroit that you can't speak. That's not what we mean. But it does mean we want to lift up and highlight and listen very carefully to Detroiters speaking. And that's a real important pedagogical thrust for what we do. And what is a Detroiter? Well, that's its own conversation, right? And we're not going to open that can of worms this second, but we certainly hope you understand what we mean when we say Detroiters speak, and that's the theme and the pedagogical thrust of this community classroom. What else do we mean by community? We also mean that we're trying to build one. So even though we're only going to be together for 8 sessions, hopefully each one, we're trying to build a community of learning together. And so we take the approach and the expectation that everybody in this room are both students and teachers. And that can be overstated. Certainly some people have more to teach than others. There's no doubt about that, depending on where you've been and what you've done and who you are. But we have that philosophy in this classroom that everybody can be both a teacher and a student. Certainly a teacher of your own experience and your own perspective, and also a student who hopefully has open ears and hearts to everything that you'll hear. And so that's another thing about what we mean with community classroom. And then I think, and not necessarily in this order, I'd say the last thing, perhaps even the most important, is that the stuff that we're talking about, the issues tonight and throughout the course, are connected deeply to this community of Detroit and this space and this land. and that we have an accountability, frankly, and a responsibility to, as a classroom, as an active classroom, to go out into the world, and many of you already do this, and we applaud that, but to be engaged and interact with and to help build community in Detroit and elsewhere. So that's really probably the most important thing. This is an active learning community, so we want you to be active. And so, a couple other just quick things by way of housekeeping. So some of you in the past have parked over in this Wayne State lot, and some of you learned tonight that that lot actually isn't available to us this semester, not because we don't love Wayne State, and not because they don't love us, but we just didn't have the agreement this semester. So parking will be a little challenging, as you probably already know. The other thing is, we're always going to have food. It won't always be pizza. I promise you that. It may be pizza again, but it won't always be pizza. And I thought I had one more thing, but I think that's it. I just want to thank everybody for being here. It was a great start, and I'll turn it over back to Diana and to our wonderful
Hey, let them know
lineup.
it's an award-winning program that we've been recognized.
I wasn't gonna brag, but we have won some acknowledgement from the University of Michigan, and so that's its own conversation. But mostly it's the folks that are here that make it meaningful. So thank you so much for being here, and I'll turn it back to Diana.
Thank you, Craig. To do a welcome to this space, before we introduce the panelists, we're actually going to have William Copeland speak a bit about the space that we're in, the Cass Corridor Commons, as well as what we may be building towards as part of this speaker series. We actually want to move towards action. So I'm going to hand it over to Will Copeland, who is currently the co-director of East Michigan Environmental Action Council and an all-around beautiful human being.
Good evening. How's everybody doing? Good. It is my distinct pleasure and joy to welcome you all to the Cass Corridor Commons. I hope that everyone gets a chance to peep out the window and enjoy the last moment of the sun as it is setting, creating beautiful colors for us to look at and bathe in the last remaining minutes of this day. I was trying to think of a transition. There is a transition that just kind of escapes my mind, has to do with the last minutes of the day or something like that. But that might come to me at the end of this remark. Welcome to the Cass Corridor Commons. The Cass Corridor Commons is many things. It's a place in Detroit where organizations and people can gather, which is what we're doing today. The title, Cass Corridor, is a very intentional statement, meaning that the Cass Corridor Commons is a place where history and justice lives in the midst of capitalism, in the midst of development, in the midst of exclusion. Many times we think that capitalism makes people feel like they don't belong unless they have income, unless they have money, unless they have status. And that's very, very true in many different ways in this area that you're in right now. There are many stories that people talk about in terms of exclusion, in terms of being made to feel like they don't belong in specific areas of Detroit, and this is one of them. And so in this Cass Corridor Commons, we really are intentionally making a commons, making a place where people can not only be, not only gather, but where they can think critically and strategically, and where justice can exist in such a place, and where justice belongs to everyday, regular people. I do represent the East Michigan Environmental Action Council. You can see our acronym on that back wall if you ever want to remember. We were gifted this building by the UU, Unitarian Universalist Church, just with the responsibility of paying the bills, keeping the lights on, and keeping everything going. And we're very happy to joyfully and commonly take those responsibilities to keep this 100-year history of this building going. The last thing that I'll say about the Cass Corridor Commons is that this partnership with the Semester in Detroit represents an example of our Commons University initiative. Diana innovated a lot of very important things with the Commons University, And as Craig alluded to with the community university, a big theme of the Commons University is this notion that through our everyday life, as well as through the very intentional work of our social movements, Detroiters have created a pedagogy, a theory, a learning, a set of information, a media, a message that is worthy of study, it's worthy of reflection, it's worthy of calling it a professorial, it's worthy of something that we should engage at a deeper end level. And so this is that opportunity in which people are used to engaging very seriously on the things that their professors tell them to engage very seriously. And so Commons University is a format in which we encourage ourselves and encourage each other to engage very seriously in Detroit. This looks like Universidad Sin Fronteras, which has done some dynamic work introducing various concepts of environmental justice in the last 12 months. The Anishinaabe Worldview class, which was held here last year, and of course the beautiful partnership with the semester in Detroit. And the last thing that I'll say about the Cass Corridor Commons is that we are available for rentals. That's a big part of how we keep everything going. My father had his 75th birthday party here in this very same room. We have 1 or 2 offices that are now for rent. For if you would like if you need office space and you need a place to go. If you would like a meeting, you can rent. We got different rooms of different sizes. We have a theater, and we don't think that it's a bad word for a nonprofit to have a business. This is a community-owned venture, and every business cannot be owned by a corporation. We need to develop the business practices that are going to keep our community going strong. And so it's no thing for me to say that we are available for rentals, and we hope that you will consider working with us in that way. The last thing that I'm supposed to talk about is the People's Movement Assembly. That's going to be the last 2 weeks of this class. So this class is not a mere academic class, and there will be a lot of episodes for learning, but the People's Movement Assembly is the episode for coming together for action. It's an opportunity to reflect and say, now that we've been talking about what the Commons is and how to reclaim it all semester, what do we want to do about it? What do we want to do about it in our community, on our campus, in our organizations? How do we want to weave the different messages that the different speakers and guests have had, and how do we want to move forward with this information? This comes out of the International Social Movement Assembly. Now, internationally, social movements were very dynamic. Many social movements have thousands, if not millions of members, and to participate in the Social Movement Assembly, you had to be representing a social movement. But in the United States, our movements were not at that strength. We did not want to say you had to represent a social movement, and so it was reframed as a People's Movement Assembly. But the purpose of the People's Movement Assembly is to build the social movements here in the United States and here where we are. And so the purpose of our People's Movement Assembly is to go past individual learning and to build the social movement that's going to take the various actions so that all of us can play a role in building this social movement that will move forward from the things that we're going to discuss this semester.
So tonight's theme is around whose land are we on, and really looking at the concept of the commons in cultural contexts. So for tonight, we'll be doing, we have 3 wonderful female panelists, and we'll be hearing from each of them from about 10 to 20 minutes each. And then if we have time at the end, we're actually going to break into 3 small groups so that you can have a little bit of small group time with one of the panelists. But since it is the first class and we had to do a little bit in terms of introduction and talk about what the concept of the class is, we may not have time, so we'll see how much time we have left at the end of each of the panels. So as a way of introduction of each of the panelists, I'm really excited to introduce Christy Biber, Mama Elizabeth James, and Mama Sandra Simmons. So So Reverend Sandra Simmons is the first woman minister in the 85-year history of the historic King Solomon Church. She has led leadership workshops, lectured on social justice themes locally, nationally, and internationally. Professor Simmons also studies English literature, literary theory, and criticism, and she's taught for over 25 years in higher ed as a lecturer of English and African American literature at Wayne State University, Eastern Michigan University, and the Henry Ford Community College in Dearborn, Michigan. She's also the co-founder and president of the Hush House Leadership and Training Institute for Human Rights. The Hush House is the Hush House Black History Community Museum originated at Howard University in 1987, and in the year 2000, it developed into a community museum located in Midtown Detroit. Today, the Hush House consists of 3 main components: the Hush House Black History Museum, the Hush House Leadership and Training Institute, the Simon Center for Peace and Social Justice Studies, and the Hush Your Mouth Media Project. And Elizabeth James is a program associate and outreach director with the Department of African American Studies. And she was named in 2014 as the Harold R. Johnson Diversity Service Award recipient, as well as the Advisor of the Year by the Office of Student Affairs. She's been awarded the Cornerstone Award from the Black Celebratory among the honors for her services and dedication to the DAS and the student community. James says that her most cherished extracurricular work is with the Black Student Union as an advisor, serving as a committee member for the Martin Luther King Jr. Symposium, and working with Camp Michitanka, is that right? And UM's Transplant Center for young recipients like herself, and is a resident storyteller. So obviously these are just small snapshots of these women's life, like this is just one small slice. They are all incredible women that have many facets. And Christy Biber is an Ojibwe Anishinaabe and is one of the founding members of Atazokon, which is an indigenous mixed media initiative. She's a photographer, videographer, and a very skilled Ojibwe arts creator. One of her incredible gifts is around beaded crafts. She's a wonderful resource and counselor in suicide prevention and in mental well-being. And tonight, she's going to help ground us with whose land we're on.
Bonjour, Magizi Dijigat Kwan Vijnakaz Anishinaabe Dao. Nimishomis Ganabajinga Onjabat Ingashe Bawating Onjabat Zagajabising and Dot. So I just wanted to introduce myself in Anishinaabe, which is the language of this land. Both to introduce myself to the spiritual realms of this space and honor that language that comes first here. And as I was thinking earlier, I wanted to dance with y'all because I think it's one thing to have knowledge about a space, but I think it is another to take action in a space, to truly put your roots in the ground here. As a part of my introduction, I let you know where my ancestors were from, and I'm also acknowledging that I am currently digging my roots back into my homelands here in Detroit, so that's what I've been up to. So I'd like to do a round dance, and this song is just to honor Mother Earth, and it's also in a circle so that we can better connect with one another. So my sister Diana is going to help me lead this, and I need at least 4 brave people to come up and dance with her as I'm speaking. Just come and join her here.
It's a simple step.
It's very easy. I'm explaining it as I'm talking. All right, so it's going to be 2 beats, and there's going to be a harder beat, and on that harsh second beat, you're just going to step to the left, and you're going to go clockwise. Cool. And you guys can hold hands. If other people want to join as I'm singing, make sure to open up that circle for them.
Thank you, Chrissy. So next, I'm going to pass it over to Mama Elizabeth Jones. I just also want to say we wish Christy for sharing this song with us.
Ooh, Mom had to take a minute to take a breath. So good to dance, so good. I'm so honored and happy to be here with you all. I can't express, as a native Detroiter, as a Native American Detroiter, as a Native African American Detroiter, it means so much to be here, to be able to share some of the stories that I've learned along the way and discovered that I had much, much more to learn. Every time you think you know it all, guess what? Somebody's going to tell you different. The story that I have to share with you all is one about the land and who was here first. As Christy said, it was the Anishinaabe people. And actually, what we call Detroit had another long, beautiful name, and it was not a place where people actually lived. It was a trading area. And so people would come to what we call our riverfront to actually do trading. Later, when our guy, the great Cadillac, appeared, and we all know where his name ended up, in 1701, he decided to found a port that was not very far away. And the fort was Pontchartrain du Detroit, because Detroit, actually in French, which I'm not pronouncing well, and my grandmother from New Orleans would kill me, it actually means the strait, because the Detroit River, though we love to call it a river, is not really a river. It's actually a strait between two lakes, Lake St. Clair and Lake Erie. And so, at this strait, at this place, people would gather to trade. Well, the French, they were very wise, and so when they first came to the area, they realized that they too would like to trade here. So Pontchartrain's idea was to gather as many of the Native American groups that were in the area to help them trade, and they would have a bartering system that would enable them to survive because they really didn't know what they were doing. As time went on, the Anishinaabe people were still here, and they were living here, and they were living all around in this state and in the areas nearby. One thing that a lot of people don't realize, and that scholars have begun to discover more about, is that there was slavery even within the Native American community. So some of the Pawnee people who had been captured during warfare were actually Native American slaves. It wasn't the same type of system that became so hateful and brutal within the, American system, the U.S. system. But it was more understanding of, we'll capture these people to work with us. Sometimes they would be traded back to their people and bartering as well. But there was still this understanding that there was a dignity among the people. This, with the French, even continued, so that they would acquire certain people from the Native Americans and bartering. This began to change with the coming of, after the French and Indian War. The French and Indian War during the 1700s created an issue where the next flag to fly over this land, first we had French after the original peoples, then we had the British. The British were much more harsh in terms of their treatment of what they considered to be slaves, and they began to introduce black slaves into the area. Now that's something that a lot of people, and myself included, I was not aware of this. One of my colleagues at the university was talking to me one day, and she said, "Beth, would you take me on a tour of Detroit?" I said, "Oh, sure." I led several GIUs to Detroit. We had, brought students down to spend the summer in the city. I thought I knew everything about the city. So we started down right by the corner of Brush and Jefferson, and we walked in a very small square. Where we are right now is actually the suburbs of Detroit to the people who originally lived in the area. And so we walked in a small square that kind of ended over by where the Spirit of Detroit is. And by the time we had walked that block, she was like, okay, this was kind of what Detroit was at the beginning. And what she told me was so mind-boggling that it was something that now I continue to try to find out more about, because she's continued to write about it. And her name is Taya Miles, and she's actually going to be doing a book signing for the book that came out of our original little tour of that block. The street that we call Brush was named for a man named Brush. And on that street where the Millender Center now stands was actually a plantation. Further down where we have our Detroit morgue, there was a house, and it was the Dennison House. And it was owned by a woman named Elizabeth Dennison. And she was a woman who had been held as a slave with her family by a family called the Tuckers. And the Tuckers, when the patriarch died, he gave two of the family, the parents went to his wife, and the children went to someone else. Well, Elizabeth ran away to Canada. The parents bought their freedom, and then they reunited in the United States, and Elizabeth from that point on tried to do her best to buy other people's freedom. And so it definitely contradicts the idea of Detroit being this very, which it also was, this place that we were searching for freedom, this sense of the Underground Railroad, which was also happening at the same time. But it helps to explain more clearly why people didn't stop in Detroit. They kept going to try to get to Canada, which is why we have so many settlements over in that area, like Buxton and other places. If you go to the North American, African American Museum over in Amherstburg is find out more information. But again, within that small block, there were a number of plantations. Macomb was another owner. The actual trial for the woman Denison, who was trying to seek her freedom, was the judge in the case who voted against her. His name was Augustus Woodward, and we know where that came from. So over and over, you start to hear the story of how slavery in Detroit was not unheard of, because it was actually still a territory, and unbeknownst to many of us who are living now, it was not as uncommon to have slavery in the North as we once believed. You know, we always thought, oh, people were running from the South. You know, the narratives of our great heroes like Harriet Tubman and many others who came and sought freedom in the North. It is a part of the story, but the other part that is beginning to, we're lifting the veil from, is that some of the seeds of racism that we still encounter came during this era when there was slavery here in the North, in the very city of Detroit. As Detroit grew, you know, trying to find a way to make peace between those who had bought their freedom, and then after the Civil War, the end of the Underground Railroad and other places, you know, other things that helped to eliminate some of the laws, still led us to find out that there's still so much more that we have to learn. You know, at one point there were 300 slaves living in Detroit, and where we have the spirit of Detroit across, which I think is very ironic, that across the street there where we now have Joe Louis Fisk was the whipping post. So when we went on the tour and she told me that, I kind of faltered a little. I had to take a moment and sit down. It made me think about the ancestors, made me think about this land, made me realize that this has always been contested space because it is so beautiful and it is so coveted. Many people want to live here. Many people have flocked to live here. And so sometimes, you know, at night I think and give blessings that my family did decide to be here. You know, my father's family coming north from Virginia, which a lot of people did during that early era of the 20s and 30s with the Great Migrations. There were also great Native migrations. So my father's people, being Mojave, came north to work in the plants, just as the African Americans from the South were coming to work in the plants to the early morning. And in Chicago and New York, all the different places that, in the warmth of other suns, one of our scholars wrote a beautiful book about that great migration and what it meant for our country as a whole, and how it began to spread people across the nation in ways that they hadn't been before. But that whole legacy of who and what we are is really, really fascinating to me. So as we start to dig and find out the names of more of these people who were held enslaved and whose ancestors are here that we didn't know about, whether they be Anishinaabe or whether they be African American, it all helps to explain some of what came to be the people whose land was here before it was what we now call Detroit. And so I just wanted to share that with you and let you know that, you know, there are scholars who are working on finding out more about this type of information because we really didn't know too much about it. And honestly, now when I give these tours of Detroit, I begin to add that in there because, you know, with my mom's family coming from New Orleans, we like to call it a gumbo. And each of those ingredients helps to add more to the richness of that bubbling pot. And so I think that it's really important that we realize that, you know, this land is very, very precious, and the land that we all take for granted every day, you know, when we walk on it. That's why I think it felt so good to dance, you know, to give honor to those who came before us. It's just really, really important to take a deeper look. Like I said, think you know something and then you find out, wait a minute, there's so much more. And not to say that the Underground Railroad wasn't very vibrant and wasn't very important. It was crucial. It was crucial. But it was also that for some of the Native Americans who also moved across the water when they started to see how some of the things were going on here on this side of the river. They were like, wait a minute, let's spread out and go to farther ground. So that whole sense of expansion, sometimes it's forced, sometimes it's coerced. It all creates a story and narrative that begins to really take at the truth of who and what we are as Detroiters. So I wanted to share that with you all.
Thank you very much, Mama Elizabeth James. Really appreciate that. And for folks that are interested, Mama Beth mentioned Taya Miles, and her book review, her book signing, is going to be this Friday at The Source. I believe it's at 7 p.m. So if folks are interested in learning more about her book, it's on at 6. Thank you, at 6. So folks are interested in hearing a little bit more about Taya Miles' book, Dawn of Detroit. That'll be at The Source at 6 this Friday. So, Midwich, thank you. And it's my pleasure to introduce Mama Sandra Simmons next.
Peace and blessings, family. Peace and blessings, family. We're here to discuss of many things. One of the things we're discussing is commons or public space and how these spaces are created. The moment we began to introduce ourselves, for instance, she prefaced my sister's name by Mama, and I am called Mama Sandra. That is not a self-designation, that is a designation the community gives us. So if you would kindly call out my name, Mama Sandra. Mama Sandra. And now we have become this family. Are you walking with me? Yes. And so this is a walk, a journey that we take together. Learning to walk together is how we become community. Walking together is how we become community. And this is something that has become quite frightening in today's political reality. My husband, Dr. Charles Simmons, and I, we are founders of what we call the Hush House Collective. It's grown from the Hush House Museum, which we're going to see a tiny little snippet from that. It includes the Hush House Leadership and Training Institute for Human Rights, the Simmons Center for Peace and Social Justice, Environmental and Educational Studies, as well as HIM, which is Hush Your Mouth Multimedia. And I like that. Thank you, like that. I thought that was nifty. And then we have, as Will pointed out rightly, a profit-making entity because we have to pay for this stuff. We have True D Soul, which is a bed and breakfast here in Detroit, all in the same community. And we recently opened a leadership house, which you all, I've sent out information so that you know about the internships and fellowships that are available. I say all that because we're talking about commons and community and public space. And we're going to talk just a bit about, if you'll allow me a few moments, to talk about how do we make this kind of space, how do we make the space public, how do we reclaim commonality, what does that mean, and how can we go about doing it together. So before I start, we'd like to start with this very short little film. This film is quite interesting because it shows what grassroots education is about. This film was made by young people at the Church of the Messiah, and I'll let it roll and then I'll talk in a moment. Thank you.
See, the exhibit itself was put together by brothers and sisters, African American curators of the Smithsonian National Museum in Washington, D.C. It's the only exhibit of its type in the world that was put together by African Americans and for African Americans.
We put this exhibit together at Howard University back in 1988. It traveled to about 73 cities around the United States and Canada.
So this gives the opportunity for the community to sit here and to learn to think critically about the contributions of Black people in America and what it is that we've done and what it is that we've lost and why it's so important that things like going to school, why is going to school important? Many of you don't, in your generation particularly, because they don't teach this in school. They stopped, we fought for programs so that you would have African American history and African American studies in school.
It focuses on, let's say, the social justice struggle of African Americans and our human rights struggle.
What's the name of the book?
But it is actually called Without Sanctuary. It's called Without Sanctuary. And what it shows is that it shows all kinds of hangings of Black people.
I wanted an exhibit that would reach people who don't generally go to museums, people in poor communities. As an example, is in Detroit, we have probably some of the richest cultural centers in the world of African American culture. However, because the schools don't have field trips like they used to, many young people don't go to see exhibits now. And so we have to take the art and the culture to the people. So that was one of the purposes of the exhibit being located here.
I asked him, did any of the Black people attempt to go back to Africa?
Oh, definitely.
And then that's when he started to talk to me about Marcus Garvey.
Oh, yes,
and
yes.
the things that he had put together. So.
And then so the government, they went and they infiltrated his organization. Did he tell you about that?
No, we didn't really get too
Yes.
deep into it.
Well, the government, because he was so bad, the Black Star movement, they bought ships. Black people, they used to march down here, uniforms and stuff. They were, do we have a picture?
We can be, and you all are right now, the fact that you're stepping out and creating a media institution and getting the skills to become filmmakers. This means that you are already on the path of leadership in the community, you see. Leadership doesn't start when you get old and rise. I mean, it starts the moment that you become conscious of the fact that there's a problem that needs to be solved. That's when you become a leader, and that you accept the responsibility for owning this community.
Why people come to us from all over the world? They come to us because we have the audacity to teach people how to use what you got to make something more. So we take in this house, we said it was a museum. So what is it? It's a museum. And we have had people come to us probably now from over 20 countries. I mean, literally, we hosted 15 people from Sweden recently. We have people flying in today. Matter of fact, a barrister from London. We have a group coming in from France. Why are they coming to the ghetto? Because this is where the answers are. You are the answer. You, and you, and you. You are the answers. Because you are our leadership. You are the hope. You are our fruit. And without you being educated and learning how to think critically and learning about your history, we're lost. We're doomed. So the fact that you're here today and you're learning this wonderful skill, this is power. And because you have the wisdom to work together, you will change the world.
I give a special thanks to the brothers and sisters from the Church of the Messiah, their teacher, and giving honor and reverence to him. Brother Craig Peterson died recently, unexpectedly and suddenly. Would you just call out his name? Brother Craig Peterson. Craig Peterson. Ashe, thank you. I've seen our very first, one of our interns that we had from your program, Ms. Shar. Would you stand up, please? She interned. Ms. Shar spent some fantastic time together and made community. So as you heard in this piece, the idea of who you are really. What is your purpose? And what does your purpose have to do with creating public space? Public space has to do with the gaze. At this very moment, you're looking at me. You're all watching me. And you're translating me through your experience, through where you've been, through what you've heard, through what we see on television, through what we discard from television. Who am I then? What do I become? There was a wonderful young man who was killed very violently some time ago, named Tupac Shakur. Anybody heard that guy? Yeah, a couple of you might have heard him. Well, there's an anthology which I think is really, really important that was called All Eyes on Me. Anybody familiar with that? Yes. Come on, let's see some hands. All right, we got a few folks, and for the rest of you who don't know, man, you're missing the classics, so go look it up. In that piece, he talked about what is it like to be a public monster? What is it like when the gaze of the public translates you to be something else? How many of you know anything about being in the public and being seen as something else than what you are? Well, there's a few of us. Keep living. We work very hard to fit in, to make ourselves normal, whatever that happens to be, but normality has shifted. Are you walking with me? Yes. And so what we become and how we see each other is becoming very, very different. The idea of what humanity means has shifted, is shifting. Are you feeling it? We have people, we have human beings, people, Americans, right now in Puerto Rico, for instance, and I just got a report today, last night. You know, the word is that there are 50 people dead. Do you believe that out of millions, over a million people, that only 50 people have died after 2 hurricanes hit? No. There are hundreds of people who are dying. There are little children who are dying right now as we sit here. And that changes us, whether we acknowledge it or not, because energy is put into disavowing or turning our heads. We change space when we are silent, because there's no such thing as real silence. There's abstinence, there's erasure, there's absence. But when we create absence, we create a vacant space, we create void. We do not create commonality, we do not create public space. Instead, we create a place that's ripe and constituted for corporate takeover. Ashe. All right, so now you're all college students and we're all grown, right? Hello? Yes. So we're going to have some grown folks talk. Can I have 5 minutes to have some grown folks talk? Okay. So here we go. What is the place that we are designed to be in? It was designed to be a utopia. How many of you have read the Constitution of the United States? How many of you have studied diligently the Constitution of the United States? 1, 2. And that is what's wrong. The Constitution of the United States constitutes a social reality of which we are all bound to live in. The Constitution states, and it still states today, irregardless of amendments, that there are part of us who are beasts, and then there are human beings. There's a sense of, oh, let's make utopia. And then there has to be servants in utopia, right? Because if I'm not going to work, somebody's got to work. Are you walking with me? Yes. So the Constitution of the United States must be studied. If you are going to understand how it is possible that human beings can disavow the humanity of other people, you have to understand how we are constituted to live together as human beings in this space. And if you don't know it, other people in other countries know your Constitution better than you do. There's something wrong with that. Are you walking with me?
Yes.
And so it's your obligation. I challenge you tonight that you pick up the Constitution, go get one of those little penguin books with the Constitution in it and stick it in your back pocket. I'm serious. And read it. And begin to understand, how are we supposed to be constituted to be American? Ask yourself a question, and those of you who have a pencil, write it down. What does being American mean for you? What does being a woman mean for you? What does being a human being mean for you? And why is that important? It's important because I need to understand where you're coming from, and I can't know unless you know. And you can't know because you've got something constituting you to be something that you don't want to be in the first place. And that's why you're not happy. All right. Commons. Commons, we think of parks, playground, recreational places, cafeterias, cultural and natural resources accessible to all members of society. Well, we know that we've gone through various histories, and there were some overt histories that negated that reality of shared space. Are you walking with me?
Yes.
And right now, to this very day, there are places where we say, no, I'm sorry, you can't come here. Whether it's insurance, we redline you out of it, we price you out of it. I just went to a conference which was celebrating the history of people, but unfortunately it was held at a ritzy place called the Hilton, and the rooms cost $259 each. So guess who was there? Not many regular folks, I can tell you that right now. This is being videoed, so I have to be careful. Public space, relating to or concerning the people at large, for community, done openly, happening openly, known by all members of the community, relating or involving the state and governmental agencies rather than private corporations. Say that with me, rather than private corporations.
Rather than private corporations.
Oh, we started some stuff now. You see, when we speak in unison, when we walk together, we have the power to change space.
Say that.
We become a corporate being, but the difference is we become a corporate being with a soul. That is the difference between us and it. Don't be fooled. It cannot have, they've given themselves, these corporations have given themselves the same rights as human beings. Did you know that? Now, corporations didn't start out this way, but they have manifested and changed themselves. And now it's time for us to change them back. Because they are to serve us. They are to serve us, and we are not to serve them. They are to serve us, and we are not to serve them. Because they have had the audacity to come into the public realm, which is a human realm. Say a human realm.
A human realm.
And a human realm is a realm which has soul, which has love, which has beauty, which has the opportunity for change, which has the opportunity for us to grow and to call things into existence. Say power.
Power.
Say change.
Change.
And you have both of those things. When the sister had us dancing in the center, she was helping us to remember some things that we have forgotten within our ancient souls. We have forgotten to remember that we are human beings who are connected one to another. You see, at the end of the day, We want peace. Ashe. We want justice. Ashe. We want to be able to share the wisdom. There's a wealth of wisdom in this room right now. You walked into the door before you even stepped in a university. You stepped in your classroom with a wealth of knowledge and wisdom from where you come from what you have experienced. And that's why what you have to say and how you have to say it and how you share it and how you learn how to walk with one another makes the difference. That is what will keep us safe. That is what will make the difference. We must learn again, and even better, because, hey, you're in 21st century folk. You can teach us old heads about how to walk together. We have to work together, the young, the old, the in-between, because we need each other. We cannot have a public space if we don't walk together, if we don't share the knowledge. Your elders have a word for you, and it's time to receive it instead of constantly working against it. So I want to say this as I end. Because they told me I only had a few minutes, so I have to hurry up. I want to take you because you know I'm a minister, so okay, yes, I'm going to go there. There's a story in the Bible about Daniel, a guy named Daniel. And Daniel was this young, brilliant guy, and, he was snatched up, he and all the best and the brightest of his community. And I think I'm standing in a room with some of the best and the brightest right now. And he was taken to a land that he didn't know, that he wasn't raised in. And then he was renamed. And his name had a meaning. Now, my name is Sandra. My grandmama named me. And it means servant of humanity. Lord have mercy. And that has kept me busy. But you all have a name. And if you don't have a name, you give yourself one. Or you've given yourself one. And that name, what happened to Daniel and his friends is that they named them names that went counter to their well-being. So it's as if someone names you, they looked at you and said, well, you know what? You're nobody and nothing. You're never going to grow. You're never going to be worthy. Just give up and die now. Now, imagine if someone names you those things. Would that be something that you'd be happy about or satisfied with? No. Excuse me? No. No, it wouldn't. So you know what he did? Would you stand up for a minute? Would you stand up for a moment, please, sir? Young lady, would you stand up for just a moment and come join me right here? Would you come join me right here, please? Would you come join me right here? Please. Grab hands. Grab hands. What they did is that he and his 3 friends who had been abducted from their place, from their community, whose names had been changed to damn them, to curse them, what they did was they came together. Say your name, sir.
Michael. Brian.
Emma.
Marcus.
Megan.
And they said their true names. And guess what happened? Community happened. Public space happened. You see, even in hell, you can create freedom. You can create space. You can create an opportunity for freedom. Thank you. Give them a hand, please. And so I would say to all of you, as you start this journey here in Detroit, it's going to be a little difficult because for some of you, this is a very different space. Open yourself. Don't judge my grandmama used to say, don't judge a book by its cover. You have to go into the communities. Don't stick around here. Get out, talk to people. Go see what you can learn. Open yourself up. Make community with people. Want a hand to another hand? You just made community. Are you walking with me?
Yes.
All right. Peace and blessings, family.
Ooh, this mic is hot. All right. So, can we get one more round of applause for and another round of applause for the whole panel, please. Thank you all so much. So this next part is going to be smooth, it's going to be beautiful, it's going to work amazingly, you'll all be amazed once it happens. So we're actually going to move into small groups where you'll be able to have a more intimate conversation with one of the panelists. And we have about 35 minutes for those small group conversations. And what I'd like you to do is actually, it's going to be self-selected, so you can pick which panelist you'd like to spend a little bit more time with. And take your questions to that small group conversation, or if you'd like to use that time, you can actually start moving towards some action. Start talking about like what could you imagine, what would you like to see this group start building, or start moving towards action towards. So Will had mentioned that there's going to be a PMA, a People's Movement Assembly, for the last 2 sessions. And so if you want to start thinking about what that might look like or generating conversation, you can also use that small group time for that. And what we're going to do is don't move yet. I'm actually going to explain how we'll be in how we'll be in space, how we'll be in community. I'd actually like to have Mama Sandra Simmons be over towards the back corner with the couches. And so if you'd like to be in that corner, then you can actually pick up your chair and move over there. Not yet. Well, you can, of course. Everyone else would like to. You can take your chair and move over to that back corner, and Craig is actually going to assist Mama Sandra in that session. Over in this corner up here, if you could just kind of have a circle of chairs with Mama Elizabeth James. So if you have your questions for her, up here. And William Copeland is going to be assisting Mama James. And Christy Viper is going to be in, there's actually a room that's off the kitchen that will go over to that session. So Christy and I are actually going to be in the small room that's right off the kitchen, right behind this room. And I see I have a logistical question, is that correct?
I would like to respectfully request 3 minutes to speak about public space in Detroit that's under threat right now. And if I can, I want to talk about Belle Isle and what's happening on Belle Isle, which is probably the most sacred public space in the city. It was originally confiscated from the Native Americans, and then a few years ago it was confiscated from the city of Detroit by the emergency managers and given to the state. And what I want to talk about is the fact that the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, which is now in charge of the island, is getting ready to renew the contract for the Grand Prix on Belle Isle sometime this month. And I'm talking about a group of activists, are trying to stop them from continuing this inappropriate use of a public space that is sacred from all races in Detroit, because it's a place where people gather to relax, to recreate, to have family reunions, and a car race is completely inappropriate for that space. So I would like to request people, if they're interested, you can talk to me or join the Facebook group, which is called Belle Isle Park or Racetrack, ? Thank you for the...
We actually have, there's a meeting that's happening in the kids' room. Is there another space that we can?
Oh, you mean the kids' room?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's good. So if folks would like to go ahead and get into their small groups, so Mama Sandra Simmons is going to be over towards the look, listen, decide. Yes,
Are we going to reconvene at the end for couple minutes? Or no?
No, I don't think, I think
Okay.
we'll do a goodbye with that.
Okay.
So no reconvening, I'll let you know when it's 5:10, when there's 5 minutes left, and then when we're at the end of the session. So logistically, there's going to be Mom and James over here, and then Christy and I are actually going to be on this side, okay? Right here. Christy.
And if anybody's interested, I have articles about what we spoke about. I don't know if I have
Where are we? Where are we?
All right, okay, I'm Alexandra. So good to have you here.
Oh, thank you. I'm
So, I thought that we might start first of all, to see really, I've got to think really pushing.
I'm Robin. I'm sophomore. I don't know what I'm doing.
So, I'm all about.
I'm Logan. I'm a senior at ULab. Taking the first week as like extra class, not as part of the semester, so I'm going to do that this first
Because there's a
semester.
lot of theorizing and very little action.
Hi, my name is Noah. I graduated from ULab in degree in sociology, and
We have to be about our business. And I know that you're about, and I really love this program. Great program. But at the end of the day, it's about what are you going to get from it, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? What does it really mean? Because for many of you, and for me, I know, to get educated was a big sacrifice. He's from my city and paying the bills off for the last year. So you got to think about what you want to do and in terms of what is my purpose. Each of us as human beings in this world, we have a purpose. How many of you wonder what purpose is? I share.
And sometimes we go through our whole lives until the end and we still haven't figured it out. And we're not happy because we don't know what our purpose is.
I'm just kind of overwhelmed. This
But
is
I
such an
promise you,
amazing program.
if you work to a place where you want to work to be more human, you will discover
Is something that
it's not about your work, it's about your fruit.
the place that I hold dearest to my heart.
I'm going
Oh,
over
just
to
go
that
back
for
and
you.
part of the city and
Fruit
see
is
all the
what
transformations I
is
have
the
been
result of what
blessed
you
to
do. You
be
know how a lot of
57
people
years.
talk a lot of
It
stuff?
makes me really aware
Oh, yes,
how many
we're going to
potential
have that,
projects
this,
that
that,
I grew up in.
we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But when you look at what the result is, the fruit is spoiled. Why? It's no good, because it didn't come to fruition. It didn't grow, because the ground was bad, or it sat around too long. You don't want to be spoiled. You don't want your work to turn over. You want it to mean something.
History. I was history.
So what I would like to do is sort of go around first of all and sort of ask some questions. And what we're doing is that we're building a space right now. I don't know if you realize we've already created a city. And now how do you create sacred space? Anybody get any ideas about that? How do you create sacred space?
Those who come in us. Because we have little ones that do it.
Who are active, important. What else? Share a story, yes. Where I come from, it's called that testimony. Yes. What else? Definitely. Honesty. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Come on.
Just add in rain.
Anybody? Yes, sir. Oh my God. Yes. 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 Because you have to be brave to be vulnerable. People like to think that you're weak to be vulnerable, but you have to be brave.
It is a big question. They call it break it down to a smaller question.
Okay? What else do we need to create sacred space?
Led you to
Prayer.
what made you interested in
If you call it meditation, whatever you call it, but it's recognizing that there are things, there are powers greater than yourself. There are powers greater than yourself. Incredibly beautiful, wonderful.
part of it.
The
And
world is beautiful.
as part of that,
It's what we're
we've been
doing.
kind of more or less understand
What we you say, I'm not doing anything, really you are. Because if we're silent, we're doing something. Nothing is something. When we say, well, I wasn't even born when that happened. But if you're taking advantage of some kind of things that are made available to you, then you're perpetrating the same thing. I share. And it's time for us to begin to tell the truth. We only feel well in telling the truth if we create a sacred space. And we can only create a sacred space if we start adding these things that we just spoken about and more. It's not easy to be the oldest one. But to be a person of purpose means you want to take a chance. So here is my question. What are you willing to take a chance on to be more human? What are you willing to take a chance on to create sacred space where you are? See, it's easy to do it away from them. But what about at home? What about in your own neighborhood? Here's a quick question. How many of you know your neighbor's apartment?
All of these things, you know, when you
Okay,
find
that's
that
looking good. That's
something
looking good.
about the city,
Yeah, but check
brings you
this out.
around to who you are.
Check this out. Many of us don't, now you say you know them. Does that mean, hi,
Draws you back.
hey?
There's something
That
about
kind of know what you're talking about? Hello? Okay, tell me what kind of
Something about why did they decide to
Okay, your neighbor lives next door.
decide to
Up and down the street. Beautiful. Anybody else?
go and I find that, especially as I see the city changing, there's
these little things are what make a difference. Many, many more people, you are the exception, because most people don't know their neighbors. Most people have never shared bread with their neighbors. Most people see kids and they say, oh, look at them. Ah, they're hard, they're no good, and instead of taking a moment and asking somebody, would you like a sandwich? Ma'am, I haven't seen you in 2 days, are you okay? The stories we hear about elders found dead, there's one of the house, I just saw them 5 days ago. But the man is 95, 5 days ago. Are you walking with them at the same time? We're talking about making sacred space, space to be who we be. That's intelligence. And stop judging. Part of your generation, one of the heartbeats that I hear from you so much is that you're tired. How do we reconcile that? Because the hold up, the pretend is the hold up a match. And you see, black people and brown people know something about math. Women know something about math. My people know, which is white men. I'm sorry, I'm making it more complicated. They're supposed to know like this world. There's something. Go ahead. You know, I love it. That's it's a work earlier. We got to be on the other side. How do you try to do it about cancer? What you've been discussing. When you were trying so hard. You got to do it this you got to wear certain clothes, certain hairstyles, speak certain language. I usually tell my class, I can be a delicious white man when I want. I know that sounds shocking, but it's about language, about using the language of access, as opposed to because words have power. Words have power. And you have the power to change wherever you are. If I call you a name, and I consistently call you that, if I tell a child, sometimes you are just so bad. You won't ever mount anything. Guess what happens to that child? Speak out loud, they believe it. Then what happens to that child? They grow up thinking they're worth. And that's what we've been doing. We've been doing it by perpetrating these lies, we say, are games. You pay for it. I think there's some big difference. There's things like fake cartoons that we got children in front of. But they're really adult content. And you're saying it for children. Do we even know where children are anymore? What's childhood anymore? Do we know? What kind of space have we created for our children? What kind of sacred space have you created for your brothers? It's your responsibility. But you know what it is? Responsibility for your neighbor. You have a responsibility for elders in your community. We're supposed to care about each other. Ashe? So that's those people because we were very careful when I used to do study abroad to South Africa. I refused short translation. I read to one like that. I would do 2 years ago. People from thank you for come to us. That would be good. You know what's trying to invite us. Then we were stepping. Okay, so going around the room and whoever she said so eloquently. We are walking with them. What are you willing to sacrifice to bring more humanity into the space? Now that can be at home, because you know you said yes, there's the back of the isn't that a shame? You know when you're stormed out, close the door. You've never done anything for me. And already was. What it meant to. There's a story behind it. There's a story. That's what I want to know. You know, all these different places, there's always these things that have names. But what does it come from? You know, so how do you bring a librarian and that historian? What does he mean? Now this is spirit. I'm asking you a question. So that I can be what does he mean? Each of these things. Say your name.
much earlier on that. Just a few, but we can still reminisce together about what it meant to be in what I call Motown. By that area, by the time you were coming out, most of the people who had been a part of Motown had moved away from that area. But we still told the stories to the kids who lived there as we grew older about, oh my gosh, Marvin Gaye's to his residence. I grew up going to school with the Four Tops and Temptations kids. What does that look like when you got music on the campus? And how the resources that other people might find negligible, we found to be incredibly helpful. So that even if we didn't have a lot, we still knew how to play instruments, we still knew how to sing. Those were things that we have to walk into the space. We're not feeling as though we had less than someone. It took more initially to have someone say, oh, well, we go around together on the Riviera. For me to say, whoa, okay, we were around the ride on Belle Isle. We had an island experience too. But, it was just a very interesting way of stepping into spaces of resource, which is what
So
I'm
you
so
say
happy
being
to
more
try
human,
to
one of the
do.
ways of being more human and sacrificing space is sharing a meal. Inviting someone in to your
Setting a
dinner
tone of intelligence.
Other ways of being human, somebody else, sacrifice, who's willing to sacrifice. Speak up, y'all gotta speak up loud, people do that kind of share my You hear this? Is everybody hear her? Sharing one's vulnerability. That means that she is going to trust you whether she knows you or not. That's a big sacrifice. Not sure? Anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Say your thing. Ellen.
Sharing laughter with people, like really laughing together, not just responding to someone's
That is a very difficult
this color change, practice on
and I'm employed at Julia, but the tasks were so
The idea of laughter
that what we ended up
joy.
doing
Because
was
joy comes out of
rethinking
laughter.
how to do
And
that.
that is one of those
So
places where we
what
can
we did
meet.
was we worked with our
Corporations can meet
there
there.
was a young man who lived
We
in
can meet there. So far, none of the things that we mentioned can corporate citizens do.
but he had special
Anybody else?
So it was
Anybody else?
bands and some of the
Say your
rest
name.
of us got together because we didn't have to buy ourselves.
I think about the way that
Taxes raised and now he lives in
that ability to like so much where they're at.
I know this is something that is really very but given that now we're seeing
Imagine
tax breaks,
coming to agreement, having the willingness
just saying,
to
oh, we're
have different backgrounds, yet finding a place where we can meet. I'm going to stop there. There are many more, I know, there's much more we can say. I want to point this out. There are universal places where we can meet. Look for the universal spaces. Universal spaces of being human. We talked about some very simple questions. It doesn't cost a lot of money. Anything we talk about costs money, except for maybe a hot dog or a sandwich, a piece of cheese and some bread. That's the only thing I heard that might cost some money. Beyond that, treating each other as human beings and showing love and joy and respect and coming to and learning how to communicate and create bonds across what these so-called divisions that are set up for us, we can do this. Are you brave enough to do it in your own community? You see, it's easy to go out to somebody else's community.
to go in volunteer. It's hard for me to see.
But you can't volunteer someplace you never did.
Who used to live here, what used to.
You have to come into a community. You have to deal with being uncomfortable. And you have to think, what's wrong with that? Uncomfortable.
Shiny
breaking bread, having laughter, making connections. It's about using what we have in us. These are the opportunities that we have to change space. Just like in class. In class, you're assigned material to read, yes? Books and books and buying books. More books and buying. Let me give you a clue about something. Scholars, my husband always says scholars. So she's scholars.
And when we
Let me say
this
this.
space here just starting.
It's very important for you. You have a responsibility. You're assigned a book. Don't take it for granted because somebody gave it to you. That's what we all end out here. Go and do some research on the book. Do some research on the author. I do some research. I mean, go back and check their theory out. What are they spelling? In everything that you learn, you are being sold something. You're attempting, just like children who play video games, they're being sold something. Why do they have cartoons called manuals? What's a manual? Anybody know? Come on, anybody know? I'm just yes ma'am. Say again. A blind follower. And what does the minions follow? Say again. The leader. And the leader of a minion is evil. Look the word up. I'm not kidding. But it's turned into a child, but they make it look like a child's game. Why is that? Now this is important for your children because here's the deal. What does this idea of virtual community mean? I didn't talk about that after you. I got a question for you to write it down. Because we have to. Who is the God of that service?
This is all
Serious.
I don't know.
You join the chat room?
It's like, no,
That's another
we're
world.
sticking out.
There's a God there. They call him, like a jet master. What do they call it?
It's just something we have to do. And sometimes it takes me.
Admin? Okay, so the admin is the God.
So, it's like, people step in.
Put it on the cloud. That's the first time I had it.
Here's some answers that it takes. Each part of it helps us. And I see people go too far. I see people.
Well,
I see some.
Well, the cloud holds, virtually it holds lots of information. But who's the God of that world? And why? You better start asking yourself questions because eventually you're going to have children. You're going to be responsible for that information. What does a virtual community look like? You know better than I do. What is virtual community? You want to go around,
That's how I kind of feel. Take us down there. And
virtual community.
then I see those things that are saying virtual versus everybody. I kind of feel like
Virtual community.
that's
Virtual
interesting
community.
because
Come on, virtual community.
now claiming control.
Virtual community.
They become
Virtual,
it's to really
what say again?
people,
What you say you are. Virtual community.
it's all part of
Virtual community. Say again?
imagine
Lonely. Virtual community.
You're showing us up.
everything I'm looking at.
Virtual
So it's almost
community.
like, okay, if we
Say
say,
again? Connection. Virtual community.
say,
Say again? Aha, unanimous.
go on back now.
Everywhere you go. Virtual community. Projection. Virtual community. Hollow. Virtual community. Click. Say again? Virtual community. Artificial. Virtual community. Okay, virtual community. Virtual community. Okay, virtual community. In person. Technology. Friendship. She just walked in. Virtual community. Now here, hear me. Virtual community is
that that's a big part of why we do the program.
By one thing.
That,
If I take a flood and I flood it, then what happens? What happened?
college graduates
Hiya!
educate
Is what? Is dead.
very pivotal role.
Virtual community disappears when you
People that are getting a lot of
unplug in. Are
incentives,
you walking
people
with
that are
me?
getting a lot of,
But
are being
human
painted as the
community
future of
does
Detroit.
not
And I
disappear
think
because
that
no
something
matter
like
what,
this is very
we
subversive in
leave
many
a
ways.
trail
Because
of where
what
we
they want
We have
from
history.
a business perspective is
We
they
have
come
this
in,
sense of reality
take some money and
that
place some
leaves
money,
a
pay some money
place
and,
where we
pay your
need something.
rent and do
Because
this and
you
do
mean
that.
something to me.
Just
And
deal with
even if
things
I no
based on
longer
what your
exist
money,
physically,
comes.
I exist in you.
Don't learn about what was there
And you
before.
carry the
Don't
energy
connect with
all
the
around.
people,
Are
even if
you
you
walking
got your
with
house
me?
and
So they just
somebody
told me I have
just
2
got
minutes.
kicked out of that
Anybody
house.
got a quick question?
You don't have to worry about that. You just
Yes, sir.
worry about the fact that your money can buy you a house. So this act of connecting with the history is very important, it's very relevant, and I don't know where y'all can take it, but I think that that's for those who are, who have that college thing, who are, being welcomed into the space. I think that that's very, I think that that's very relevant and very important. And then furthermore, I think that there is a special responsibility, which I'm still trying to find out what it is. Those who are from Detroit, who get this access to this college thing, to this professional thing. Those people are often, like I said, overlooked. Affirmative action is slashed. There's, the numbers were slashed. There are very few. It's often portrayed as this, like you got the poor, uneducated Detroiters versus the, privileged, educated people, but there are those of us that are in the middle, you know what I'm saying, and we don't often define for ourselves what we want to do with those types of things. You know what I'm saying? And so we're almost made to feel like we don't exist. When we exist as well, and we get to use our existence strategically, which we can do more a better and better job at as well. So I think that's part of why we have these conversations, is to help everybody figure out how to use this, how to use stuff strategically. And I think that's why we're here, because at this.
Don't bring your chair, leave your chair, leave your chair. Come here for a minute. Okay, now check this out. Real fast. Hold on. Real fast. Now listen, I want you to take this with you. One of the most important things that we have is testimony. It's telling our story. It's testifying. That's one of our most important things. If I testify to you, you bear witness to me. You bear witness to me. Not to something somebody else told you, but you bear witness to me. It's a sacrifice, but it's power. Each of you right now at this moment, enjoying some human being who may be intimate. I want you to say, speak something I'm giving something power. You're right. Speak something personal. We're going to go. Everybody get a copy.
Okay, everybody, thank you for being here. Before you leave, if I I just have your attention for like 2 minutes. First of all, I want to thank our wonderful presenters again, and certainly Diana and Will and the comments, and all of you for being here. I'm only going to hold you for like 90 more seconds, so let's just thank everybody first for the wonderful evening we had. Two other things I wanted to say, maybe 3, but no more. One, there's posters as you walk out. These are public events. Remember how we started? This is a community classroom, and so we want to continue to invite people. Certainly we want you to come back next week, but we also want you to, we have more chairs, and we'll find a place to put them in here. But there's posters as you walk out. If you want to take one with you, wherever you go, bring one of those posters. Next week, we're going to have several wonderful speakers, and if you looked on the poster, if you've seen the Facebook ad for the event tonight, we're talking about Crisis Part 1 is what we're calling it. Of course, you could have Crisis Part Many when we talk about what's happening in Detroit, but certainly in the world. Next week, we're going to have somebody here to speak about water shutoffs, which many of you probably have heard of. We're going to talk about housing challenges. We have somebody from Detroit Eviction Defense who's going to be here. And we also have Phil Jones, right, Diana? I can't remember where, Diana, where's Phil from? For next week?
Talking about the food as a commons.
Food as a commons, right, so food insecurity issues. So those are some of the issues we're going to unpack next week. We hope you come back. Lastly, if your chair folds, and I know Kim has a quick announcement.
That was it.
Okay, Ed, our wonderful friend Ed back here, who, let's thank Ed for getting our room organized. He asked, and I asked for him, there's a folding chair near you. Could you fold it, put it up against the wall? If you're in the U of M class and you're taking the bus back, the bus will be right out there in a few minutes. We'll leave in about 10 minutes. Everybody else, thank you so much for being here. Spread the word, grab a poster, and we'll see you next week Tuesday. Thank you.
Yes.